Hello world. Welcome to the news show. This is the Red Fleet. Today we got me, of course, your host with the most. I don't need any intro. And we got Sally on the big screen. Huh? We got John Christopher Kern with us and Mr. Axel Schulz. So, maybe you want to introduce yourself, Sally. Who are you?
Yeah, who I am. Okay, hello everyone. You know me. I'm an educator, a translator, and a Marxist researcher from Vietnam. I have translated Rosa Luxemburg from English and German to Vietnamese for almost 10 years in Marxist Internet Achieves. So I'm very happy to be here to discuss with everyone because Rosa Luxemburg is one of my most important and my favorite thinker of all times. This year marked 107 years that Rosa and Clark passed away. So this roundtable purpose is to bring Rosa ideas back to our political life. I remember my favorite quote from her is Freiheit ist immer der Freiheit der Andersdenker. Kinder. Sorry, bad German. Yes.
Freedom is always the freedom of the other. Freiheit ist immer
Of
die
the
Freiheit der
dissenter.
anderen. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, Axel, you probably got all that. You got a bit German. Axel, who are you?
Yes, hi, I'm Axel Schulz. I teach European history at the State University of New York in Potsdam, but it's not the Potsdam most people would know, the one next to Berlin in Germany, but a small town in upstate New York, and not too far from the Canadian border. Yes, that quote by Rosa Luxemburg, Freiheit ist immer die Freiheit der Andersdenkenden. Freedom is always the freedom of those who think otherwise, has, stayed with me for a long time because it's obvious that we all allow for those who agree with us to speak their mind. The real freedom of speech is tested when it comes to encouraging those who disagree with us to speak their minds as well. So also Luxemburg was an avowed socialist, and she has a lot to say about why we need a socialist transformation in our world. She was also thoroughly committed to political pluralism and to democracy, and we will have a chance to talk about why that is so significant. To say a little bit about my own background, I was born and raised in East Germany. I've been in North America for many, many decades. Very interesting experience, having encountered different forms of oppression in some ways, as a state socialist form of oppression in some ways, and a capitalist form of oppression. I've been involved with the English publication of the collected works of Rosa Luxemburg, in particular with editing one particular volume, volume number 3 of the collected works of Rosa Luxemburg, the political writings on revolution 1897 to 1905. Not sure whether anyone can see this volume. So very much looking forward to participating in this conversation.
Very good. Nice blue. And the last one. Who are you, John?
Yes, so I'm John Christopher Kern. I have been a student since of Hegel and Marx for the last 40 years, and which meant that I've been doomed in here in Los Angeles to being an adjunct professor in pretty much everything involving the humanities and social sciences. So I have taught classes mostly to Chinese and Hispanic folks here in Los Angeles in literature, in sociology, in economics, in ancient, modern, early modern European history, art history, a lot of American political science. I am a theorist, and I am a new student of Rosa Luxemburg. I am aware of her work. But my reading is marginal, and I am looking forward to learning today from Axel and Sally, and also fitting what they teach me into an overall Marxist Hegelian framework, and a sense of what's happening in politics today, given that teaching is what I am mostly concerned with. So how would I teach what Sally and Axel have to say? I'll leave the next up to, well, it's disconcerting that our fearless leader doesn't explain more of his motives and background, but we'll leave it with that. Yes, let's go forward.
Motives and background. Do you really need that? It's already plain in the
For the
open.
archives. For the archives.
Okay, for the archives. Today's topic is Rosa Luxemburg and socialism in the 21st century. There's not really much I can say about this. It just came together, one of those things that just happened. I think Sally proposed the topic. Incidentally, Rosa is all over the place in my head. I'm a lefty, member of the Left Party in Germany. Rosa Luxemburg Foundation is the educational arm of our party, if you will. And they are all over the place in my feeds, in my readings. Rosa has still a big thing for me when it comes to political theory, activism, mass activism, up to the point of general strikes. And I think the way she died, by treacherous hands, and the old SPD party, which got away into the bourgeoisie, into the better society by getting rid of the communist revolutionaries. This is the way I would look at it, and the way capital solved the question of socialism in Germany. And then led up to the Weimar Republic. That was, in my view, the victory of liberalism, then ordoliberalism, and then straight up fascism as a reactionary response to what socialism actually brings to the table. So that's how I look at it. And there's for me, still much to learn from her, and from the history, how it unfolded, mainly the lack of weapons. So this all could have been different if they had the Black Panthers around, you know. So the fascists probably would have been very unsuccessful in trying to kill Rosa and Karl if there would have been something like a well-armed militia to protect them. And that's probably what I would raise as a question for you all, how you feel about all that in the historical context, how history unfolded, and if there could have been another way with the successful revolution in Germany, and if that might have been a factor. So that's the juicy part. I'm just giving it all away right now. So who wants to tackle it? Sally, you're on the big screen. What do you think? Let's
It's
start.
just odd that when you mention Black Panther Party is funny.
Yes,
Okay, yeah, I think we should start to the main thing.
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. Yeah. But maybe we should do this more structured and less chaotic like I just did. And we have prepared some questions. So maybe we'll start with the first one, which is how did Rosa Luxemburg understand socialism in her own historical context? Alex, you're on the screen. You want to take a go at that?
I could go first.
Okay,
I-
Axel. Yes.
I could go
I didn't
first.
feel
Okay.
addressed when you said
Okay, Sally.
Axel. Yes.
Sally goes first.
So yes.
I'm already messing with our setup. Sally goes first. I forgot about
Okay, yes. Okay, so Sally and then Axel and then Chris.
it. Okay, that's how we do it.
Okay, so let me repeat again the questions that Coin just asked. Did Rosa Luxemburg understand socialism mainly as a political project, a historical process, or a democratic practice from below? So, to my thinking, Rosa Luxemburg, for Rosa Luxemburg, socialism is not a political plan designed in advance by a party or the state. It is also not a result that will automatically appear once historical conditions are ready. Although she worked within Karl Marx's materialist view of history, Rosa strongly rejected the mechanical readings of Marx that treat history as a fixed path leading inevitably to socialism. For her, history is open. What happens depends on real struggle, mistake, learning, and the political creative of ordinary people, not on a pre-written plan. So Rosa understood socialism, first of all, as a democratic practice from below. It's rolled out of the everyday struggle of the working class and other oppressed groups. Democracy, in her thinking, is not something that comes after a successful revolution. It's a basic conditions of the revolutionary process itself. Without the real democracy, meaning open debate, disagreement, experimentation, and even failure, socialism cannot develop. Instead, it risks turning into a new form of domination, even if it uses the languages of liberation. I think here Rosa follow Marx's idea that the working class must free itself while also criticizing attempts to turn Marxism into a technical system for managing the state power. And these ideas makes Rosa works relevant for the left today. Many left approaches understand socialism through the goals like winning election, entering government, or passing progressive policies. Well, these goals are important and necessary. However, I still think that winning election, or also in Rosa terms, is only one step. It is not the final goals. Election and state power should be seen as the tools within a longer process. So the key issue is like whether people remain active participants in political life beyond electoral moments. And Rosa also poses us to question the left tradition that values stability, discipline, and the correct line above democratic debate. So when internal discussion and movement democracy are sacrificed in the name of efficiency, something essentially is lost. Any project that calls itself socialist but fear the free and unpredictable participation of the masses already carries the risk of becoming anti-emancipatory. So Socialism, in this sense, is not seem like a better way to run capitalism, but we have to understand it as a collective process of political learning, messy, risky, and full of conflict, yet impossible to replace. That's my idea. And Axel?
Yes, I very much agree with what Sally just said. There are a couple of concepts and names, titles, and slogans Rosa Luxemburg is associated with, such as socialism or barbarism. And I think this statement, this diagnosis, socialism or barbarism, illustrates a great deal about her political analysis, about her political thought. First of all, as Sally pointed out, Rosa Luxemburg was not a determinist. She did not think history would follow ironclad laws. History is fundamentally open. The future is fundamentally open and not predetermined. Socialism is a possibility, but it's not inevitable. The other possibility is things falling apart. Rosa Luxemburg very much believed the status quo capitalist development, in some countries, liberal bourgeois democracy, in the long run is probably not sustainable. There have been some Marxist theoreticians such as Eduard Bernstein who believed it would be possible perhaps to find a more gradualist, reformist path to socialism, taming capitalism and essentially arriving at a situation where revolution would not be necessary. Rosa Luxemburg was a revolutionary, so she saw socialism as a revolutionary project, but she did not think revolution is something that can be pushed in any kind of authoritarian fashion. So Rosa Luxemburg is very democratic in her approach. She looks at Marxism as the theory and practice of working class self-emancipation, self-liberation. She very much emphasizes working people finding their own practices, finding their own modes of activism and resistance. And she wanted to learn from working people. For example, during the revolution of 1905, she went back to Russia. She was originally from the Russian Empire, the Polish part of the Russian Empire, and she discovered a new mode of resistance in terms of what Russian workers did, the general strike, and she wrote a great deal about this new form of political activism and resistance. But at the same time, Rosa Luxemburg did not think political organizing didn't matter. So she very much champions spontaneity, but also organizing. And she thought about what kinds of organizing vehicles we need. So I think her approach is very, very complex and inclusive. There are some people who like to compare and contrast Rosa Luxemburg and Lenin. And I just want to point to August Thalheimer, who famously said, it's not Rosa Luxemburg or Lenin, but Rosa Luxemburg and Lenin. And while there were significant disagreements, sometimes more pronounced, sometimes less pronounced, between Luxemburg and Lenin, they were fundamentally on the same side. Rosa Luxemburg famously offered a critique of the Bolsheviks and the Bolshevik Revolution, but this critique was mixed with fundamental encouragement of what the Bolsheviks did and their accomplishments. But she also always admonished them to push for greater internal democracy. And she warned about the dangers of what would happen if democratic practices are more and more reduced. Reform or Revolution, one of Rosa Luxemburg's most famous books, is in some ways, it's not misnamed, but it could just as easily have been called reform and revolution, because Rosa Luxemburg looks at reforms and revolution as part of the same package. What Rosa Luxemburg opposes is reforms as an end in and of themselves. She opposes reformism, and she sees reforms as necessary stepping stones toward revolution. Coming back to this phrase, socialism or barbarism, I think we can see this very clearly today. The status quo is not sustainable. We are making gigantic steps toward greater and greater levels of barbarism. So either we push toward changing things into a more humane and socialist direction, or we will potentially endanger perhaps the entire survival of our species. And Rosa Luxemburg was very much aware of these fundamental alternatives over 100 years ago. She wasn't the only one, of course, but she put all of that very clearly in her political and philosophical writings.
Yes. Thank you for that, from the both of you. So as I so a number of reactions to this. So it's interesting that the idea of historical determinism, the idea of the state as merely superstructure, that has sort of passed away. We don't think about that anymore, which I think is a good thing. And Rosa Luxemburg seems to be part of an awakening of leftists to say history matters, but it's not deterministic. And indeed, history, we have left that. I haven't met anybody who's a historical determinist. I can't think of anybody who's a historical determinist. Or to put it another way, the Second International is virtually forgotten now. Indeed, I read a right-wing editorial saying Marxism is no longer valid because it believes in historical determinism. What? No, nobody thinks that anymore. And Rosa was one of the first to see politics and history more as a matter of possibility, it seems, which is actually how I feel as well. The one thing that I see, though, but in here, going back to history and sort of the tragedy of history, and that's when so I am. It makes complete sense to me that socialism is a matter of praxis. It's a matter of experimentation. The working class must free itself, but at the same time, it must do so as it becomes a state power. That is highly problematic. But Luxemburg seems to be aware of this. Elections matter, but so does action beyond elections. This seems to me these are lessons that we have learned historically, and Rosa Luxemburg is pointing the way. Socialism merely as a way of managing capitalism. Here is another historical comparison. There was a moment in progressive democracy here in America, which focused very much on elections, in which the elite, bourgeois elite, were thinking, socialism doesn't seem to be bad after all. Maybe the super elite were thinking maybe we can use this. This was you can find these moments in reading, of all people, Teddy Roosevelt. Socialism, huh? In other words, the American elite toyed with this idea that we can use bourgeois socialism. Bourgeois socialism might work very well. This stopped after the American government took over the economy for about 18 months to run World War I. But the bourgeois has shown itself perfectly adaptable, able to take on socialism as a means of controlling labor. Bourgeois socialism seems to have a lot more development to go if that is sustainable. There is, or possible in the first place. There is, though, back to history, a point that Mr. Corn had raised, and that is that we have so much that socialism is carrying. In other words, when I read, when I see all these things, so the working class must free itself, it must become, while becoming a state power. Elections are important, but beyond elections. Socialism seems like a big word. And we are asking it to do many things, particularly when we look at why socialism lost. Socialism lost. I will put forward, I will assert, though merely as an argument, of course, that when it came down to it, what the socialists didn't have was what the right did have, and that was the Freikorps. That was a militia. Now, which, in other words, a power on the street. When Marx writes Class Struggle in France, and then again when he rewrites that in the 18th Brumaire, he says every social group needs to organize a military wing. It needs to have a power on the streets. And this was, I think, perhaps too much to ask of socialism at this time, particularly since the right already had an army. They already had a right wing that was right, that moved right into membership of the Freikorps. It's not clear to me that Germany itself was ready for a surrender. That in 1918 that the Germans surrendered, or the German army surrendered, much to the surprise of the Germans. Because they thought at least they had a standoff. They thought at least they could hold out for longer. In other words, the socialists were not prepared to construct a militia to fight the Freikorps. Or put it this way, the socialists had rifles, the Freikorps had machine guns. To this extent, we would now. I know in asking this, I'm saying, well, they along with being all these other things. Engaging in praxis, experimentation, freeing itself, taking over state power, winning elections, pursuing long elections, to ask that the working class have a militia that could fight the Freikorps, that's a bit too much to ask at that historical moment. And maybe that's, I'm not talking historical determinism. I'm saying that Rosa Luxemburg saw the future. What is stopping ICE are people in the streets. Are people in the streets. There, you don't always need machine guns to win, but at that particular moment, in German cities, the Freikorps had machine guns and the socialists did not. And that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And maybe asking too much of socialism at that very moment. That's my take on what is being on what Sally and Axel just articulated.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you all. That was already mind-blowing. Wow. We're definitely going to get censored.
Well, you started it all, Corn. It was your idea.
I know, it's all my fault. I'm going to take that hit.
I just ran with your one idea.
Very good, very good. Okay, maybe I I should try to stick to the structure we have, and we just take it bit by bit. Let me find the next question. Okay. To what extent do Rosa's critiques of the party, the state, and centralized power remain relevant when considering contemporary left and social movements? So, essentially starting at the beginning. Sally, what do you want to say?
Okay, yes, thank you. Well, I think I would adjust the questions a little bit here, like how relevant are Rosa Luxemburg critics of the party, the state, and centralized power in today's left movement? I mean, it's the same, it's just a different way of asking. Well, so I use Rosa because I'm close to her. I don't use Luxembourg, by the way. So one of Rosa's most lasting contribution to the Marxist tradition is her strong critique of substitutionism. By this, she meant a process in which the party replaces the working class and the state replaces society. And finally, a small leadership group claimed to represent the entire political life of the masses. So Rosa did not reject organization or political party as such, just like what Axel said before on the disagreement between Lenin and Rosa. Well, Rosa did not reject organization or political party as such. What concerned her was the moment when an organization begins to identify itself with historical truth, and when political discipline turns into power that is no longer controlled from below. And she argues that when an organization sees itself as the only true representative of class interests, democracy stops being a tool of liberation and becomes something dangerous that must be managed or limited. Rosa saw how this alienation can also appear inside revolutionary movement themselves, justified in the name of efficiency, discipline, or historical necessity. And for Rosa, the key issue is whether that power remains closely tied to the active participation of the masses. Many movements and organizations today use progressive language, such as social justice or equality or radical democracy, but they operate through bureaucratic and professional structure. Political decisions are often left to expert, full-time activists or organizations closely connected to NGOs, funding system, and technical management frameworks. In such settings, popular participation is often reduced to symbolic acts like signing petitions, sharing posts, voting occasionally, or appearing in tightly controlled spaces. So, Rosa helped us see that not every project that coexistence left is truly emancipatory if power is separated from the ongoing control of those who are oppressors. Even when the goals are progress, fairness, or equality, the way an organization's function can still reproduce old relation of domination in new forms. So finally, what makes Rosa critics still relevant today is not that she offer a perfect alternative model of organization, but her firm principle: socialism cannot be built by postponing democracy for the future, nor can it be defended by claiming that concentrated power is necessary during the transition period. In a time when many left movements move between technical governance and populist politics, Rosa forced us to return to a basic questions like, do our current forms of organization expand people political self-rule, or do they limit it? If the answer is the latter, then for Rosa Luxemburg, the problem is not tactical, but a betrayal as the very core of the left promise of liberation. Yes, that is my idea. Thank you. And Asa?
Yes, again, I very much agree with this take. Rosa Luxemburg very much champions empowering ordinary people and being very suspicious, often fighting bureaucratic structures, including bureaucratic structures within left-wing movements. Now, nobody is perfect. And there's always a gap between what people advocate and their personal practices. So while Rosa Luxemburg is probably as, I don't want to say close to sainthood as anyone could be, but I think she has really been an example of, embodying her political ideals. But even Rosa Luxemburg has been criticized in terms of her own political shortcomings and perhaps personal authoritarian tendencies in the Communist or Socialist Party of Poland and Lithuania, for example. So the point I'm trying to make is there have been examples where people who champion democracy and freedom theoretically have not always consistently embodied these ideals. So we should not idealize or romanticize anyone. But Rosa Luxemburg very much stands out as an example of someone who really pushes for challenging bureaucratization, challenging substitutionism, and advocating for working class democracy, democracy from below. And I think this is incredibly significant as far as keeping the socialist project alive and maintaining its legitimacy for working class and oppressed people around the globe.
Right. So I had to quickly scribble down substitutionalism. That was a new one for me. I like it as a danger because we simply don't want to substitution. We don't want to think of socialism as merely being a substitute for the state. I do, so speaking against everything I just said in my previous screed, there is a sort of good thing. What we don't want to do is that when a revolution is successful, oftentimes this revolution comes with a militia power, or when countries managed to set up socialism, they did so through the military. And when you do this, then you sort of hypostasize or reify a particular moment of violence. And this moment of violence in which socialism was born remains as sort of a value in itself. And I think of Weber's understanding of the state as merely the legitimate holder of violence. And that vision of the state is empty. And if socialism sort of is a substitute for the state, then socialism becomes, yes, simply the legitimate holder of violence. Interestingly enough, well, but both in the American context, we had the American Revolution, and then 10 years went past before we got our second Constitution. An interesting, in other words, violence, state violence, revolutionary violence wasn't reified within the second Constitution. The same, interestingly, for in the Soviet Union. And this, I think, is interesting, and particularly when we think of Lenin. And perhaps for Axel as well, he may have had the same problem I had, is that when we teach the USSR, we have to explain to our American students what exactly is a Soviet. The United Soviet Socialist Republic, and then they go, well, what's a Soviet? And we have to explain to them that a Soviet is actually sort of the attempt to set up local small-scale participation, and that this was a very serious era in Soviet politics. These Soviets. In other words, and these Soviets were successful after the Civil War, the Civil War and after World War I. They were crushed by a combination of continued bourgeois state pressure on Russia, or the USSR, but also a connection between the personal politics of Joseph Stalin and the fact that the state is much more easy to organize as a top-down factory system, making a central army. In other words, the Metal Eaters. They were the ones who constructed the Central Soviet states, or the Central USSR states, and slowly the Soviets were crushed out. That's the sort of tragedy, is that state growth, state development seemed to overwhelm the Soviets. And that's, in other words, one common critique by the American bourgeois of Lenin is that Lenin was a revolutionary leader, but Lenin didn't know how to establish institutions. So that ultimately what determined the history of the USSR were the personal politics of Stalin, to the extent that he allied with the institutional process of industrialization. And industrialization calls for centralization, and the Soviets were not up for the task, not organized for that task. That's sort of a tragedy. Luxemburg, I think, or Rosa, I'm afraid that it's difficult for me to assume the same intimacy that Sally has with Luxemburg. I do sort of blush when I say Rosa, but maybe I'll get over it. As for we don't. So I'm looking. Remain relevant. Oh, we haven't yet talked feminism and Rosa's authoritarianism. I'm going to mention something very briefly that Korn and I discussed last time. And that is.
I think it's for the next questions.
Oh,
Chris?
okay. Yes, we'll do that next time. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was excellent. I would immediately pick up on that to just drop some thought. First thing that came to mind is, so you could say socialism failed for national security reasons. Let me crack a little joke here. That's what I was thinking, and I kind of like the idea because state development seems to be a problem in this context, and the centralization of power. But there's also history going on. The Nazis at the door. I mean, there's a lot going on there. But for me, that would be a central point to take away from. And then also this lack of institutions and, in essence, then the failure of the Soviets, if you will, could be prevented if we would build institutions. And I'm thinking digitalization, automatization, those are essentially tools for socialist revolution. We could easily set up civic councils with all that without even leaving the fucking house. I mean, it's right there, and we just have to pick it up. It's kind of, we're in very interesting times. So, yeah, maybe let's try to keep this structure. Here's the next question. Is Rosa's concept of mass spontaneity still viable in the 21st century, when political action is increasingly mediated by digital platforms, media systems, and institutional structures?
Okay, yeah, that's my favorite concept, spontaneity. So Rosa ideas of spontaneity is often misunderstood as emotional outburst, lack of organization, or opposition to political discipline. In fact, Rosa used this concept to describe the creative political energies that rose out of people's real material experiences, social conflict, and everyday struggle, not from the plans designed in advance by party or leaders. And for Rosa, spontaneity does not reject organization. Instead, it is a living force that pushes organization to learn, adapt, and change. So in her thinking, spontaneity and organization are always interact, but they should never be treated as the same thing. She was stressing that the new forms of awareness, organization, and strategy are created inside the struggle themselves rather than being delivered from the outside. And spontaneity then is not an early stage that must be overcome, but an essential part of emancipatory politics. And in the context of the 21st century, where political action is increasingly shaped by social media, algorithm, mass communication, and digital platforms, this idea is very important for today. On the contrary, it has strong critical value. Today, politics often appear as fast and emotional mobilization that fades quickly. The wave of outrage, hashtags, online campaigns, or media events designed to attract attention. Rosa help us clearly distinguish between symbolic emotional reaction and long-term self-organization rooted in the work condition and social reproduction, and also the material power relation. Many contemporary forms of mobilization create only the appearance of spontaneity, while in reality they are shaped or limited by invisible power structures such as algorithm, media logic, and funding sources, or accepted political narrative. The conditions for spontaneity are restructured from the outside, making it easy for political energy to be consumed, neutralized, or turned into harmless activity. And when spontaneity is separate from material life and exists only in media space, it risks becoming short-lived energy that serves reset political strategies rather than opening new paths toward liberation. So Rosa also criticized two opposite but connected tendencies on the contemporary left. On one side is technocratic organization, which fears spontaneity because it is seen as uncontrollable, and on the other side is the movement romanticism. That's what I think. Asa?
Yes, again, very much agree with this. I think one significant role of Rosa Luxemburg that is sometimes overlooked is her role as an educator. She taught at the party school of the Social Democratic Party, and she really helped educate a whole generation, perhaps several generations of social democratic activists, of Marxist activists and theoreticians. Rosa Luxemburg believed very deeply that the traditional division between ordinary members of the German Social Democratic Party and intellectuals, party intellectuals, is quite harmful. She believed ordinary people, ordinary party members should develop themselves intellectually and culturally. They should read, they should think, they should cultivate their abilities. So self-cultivation is very important. And in a day and age when we have all these media platforms, all of these social media platforms that encourage a lot of performance activism, I think, encouraging critical thought, encouraging a critical pedagogy is very important. And perhaps Rosa Luxemburg remains yet to be discovered as an important pedagogue and theoretician or practitioner of critical pedagogy. There's often this debate about Rosa Luxemburg rejecting the concept of the vanguard party, which is to a large extent true. But she had this notion of the most theoretically developed political activists having a responsibility to educate, to organize, and to help raise the level of other people, to play a role in being incubators, so to say. So I think that is what we need to do: develop platforms, create networks where we foster critical dialogue, where we encourage people to think critically, and to develop Marxism as a living theory. Some people have noted that when you read Rosa Luxemburg, you can in some ways see a thinker in the process of thinking. Rosa Luxemburg is not someone who just sloganized. Rosa Luxemburg is someone who is very much approaching things as a process and seeing them in action, seeing them unfold. And I think this is more important than ever, especially since, in our day and age with what some have called techno-feudalism. Critical thinking is what the status quo is trying to beat out of us.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I was frozen there for a second. Great. I get it. So to sort of, we see historically and theoretically, as theory has developed, as history has happened, we see confirmation of all of these possibilities and contradictions at the same time. Right now, we can say that spontaneity through digital platforms, through the internet, evidently is an incredibly powerful tool, powerful enough for the Ayatollah regime to shut down the internet right now in Iran. In fact, I've heard that it has been reported that the Iranian regime intends to shut down the internet permanently in Iran. In other words, they see it as a threat. Which tells us that that right now it's a weapon that is being used for the forces of left-wing spontaneity. It is said by de Tocqueville. I was talking with Corn about this in yesterday's discussion, that by de Tocqueville, looking at America, that it takes a long time to get a democratic culture to act. It took Americans 5-10 years for them to react against fascism. It took us 20-30 years and a lot of sort of deviating motives for Americans to take arms against the Confederacy. But once Americans do act, the reason why, by the way, is self-interest and apathy. But right now, what we see coming out of Minneapolis and on left-wing media is a blossoming 100 flowers, dare I say, of left-wing commentators in regards to Minneapolis. There is a huge response, and I'm seeing all sorts of left-wing commentators with audiences of over 50,000, 100,000 popping up everywhere. One of my favorites, Amanda's mild takes. Unfortunately, as she says, she had a boyfriend who made her read Marx when she was an undergraduate, and that turned her off so much against Marx that now she hates Marxism, if only because her boyfriend was a real jerk and made her read all this stuff that she didn't find interesting. She's an excellent analyst and a great organizer. It's not clear whether or not these movements will be sustained. But in these moments of openness, we do see spontaneity sort of taking hold, or not so much spontaneity, but resistance. It will be interesting to see what happens in Minneapolis after ICE is gone. To what extent this is going, this surge of internet connection and left-wing commentary can be, I wouldn't say institutionalized, but maintained. In Rosa's time in America, again, there was a socialist moment before World War One, in which all sorts of legislation was being passed. There were union movements all over the place. There was a real opening. World War One came, and then after World War One, there was a Red Scare and a complete fascist shutdown of America. Unions were being shut down, imprisoned, or executed. But interestingly enough, in the in the 30s and through World War II and into the 50s, unions were extremely successful in organizing workers and taking part in the American institutional structure, such as you had Republican President Eisenhower saying that American unions will forever be a part of the American institutional structure. In other words, unions at a working class level did manage to become part of the institutional structure. And some people say we're responsible for maintaining, building the middle class in America. I think that's right. I think that's right. And the unions were actually, they were being pushed from left-wing members. Unions were quite radical in those days, except when they weren't. During the Cold War, there was a battle between left-wing unions and anti-communists. Unions, as part of the Democratic Party, supported American intervention in Southeast Asia. And ultimately, unions were attacked successfully by Ronald Reagan. In other words, it's hard to set up, to institutionalize, to protect, to preserve these places of spontaneity and critique from the bottom. And even when you do, they can be captured. But we also know that no struggle is won forever. Every generation must prove itself able to continue the struggle. The struggle is never over. And it would be a myth to think, or a dangerous myth to think that, oh, if we can just get our institutions right, then we're okay. There will always be a place for spontaneity, a necessity for spontaneity. And this is a problem which the liberal constitutional state has not been able to address. And I will step off my soapbox and say,
Yeah, perhaps I can briefly add to that. The liberal constitutional state not only is inadequate, it is actually openly harmful
yeah,
to democracy. It undermines democracy. I just want to point to McCarthyism,
yeah,
which
that's
was
the,
not just a right-wing project, it was a liberal project as
yes, it was.
well. Cold War liberals have participated and orchestrated McCarthyism just as much. Of course, they have done it with, less idiotic, less ultra-reactionary rhetoric, but the overall effects have been the same. And their objective was to not just rein in the left, but to destroy the left.
Yeah,
And when it comes to the situation in Germany, yes, as has been pointed out before, Rosa Luxemburg was killed by right-wing militia units with the full collaboration
yes,
and active encouragement of the social democratic leadership. Friedrich Ebert,
yeah,
for all intents and purposes, a liberal. He made a deal with Wilhelm Gröner, and this, I think, illustrates fundamental liberal illusions.
yes,
That the liberal establishment, in many ways, believes ultimately it is possible to make a deal with the far right.
yes,
You can incorporate the far right, make a deal with the far right, which they believe is preferable than making a deal with the left. And then the far right will be incorporated into some sort of constitutional democratic project. And of course, the right was never really willing to accept any kind of democracy. And the end result was the dismantling of the Weimar Republic. But the Weimar Republic was, fatally weakened by the fact that the military establishment from Imperial Germany hated the Republic, and yet the liberal social democratic government kept this military establishment in power along the lines of the emperor had to go, but the generals remained.
yes,
And it wasn't just the military establishment, it was the entire state apparatus, the judiciary, the police, and so on and so forth.
yes.
So we have a real problem here in terms of, reform-minded socialists and liberals rejecting a revolutionary project and essentially believing you can keep capitalism, which means the private accumulation of wealth, and that is somehow in some ways reconcilable with democracy. And I think what is most relevant about Rosa Luxemburg is her insight that capitalism ultimately is irreconcilable with democracy, socialism or barbarism. Either you have a democratic society where the majority of the people ultimately decides what will be done, or you have, private interests in the private accumulation of wealth. And the two cannot be reconciled.
Exactly.
Either you have capitalism or you have democracy.
Yeah.
And Rosa Luxemburg stressed again and again, this notion of there cannot be any kind of socialism without democracy, and there cannot be any kind of democracy ultimately without socialism. And I think both are equally true. And there are so many people who believe either one or the other. And it is important for us to fully comprehend both aspects of this. There cannot be democracy without socialism, and there cannot be socialism without democracy.
Axel.
I'd like to add to that.
No. Let me add a quick question from chat first, because that is somewhat going to this point. Someone asked, a Vamprips asked, what was the relationship between the Spartacists and the KAPD? Axel, you probably...
Oh, we have more questions than we
Yeah, I've collected them, and we're working through this one by one. We got some nice feedback. Axel, do you know some more about the Spartacists and the KAPD?
Yeah, they were essentially more in favor of a council communism. I mean, it's a fairly complicated situation, but to some extent, the KAPD can be described as a manifestation of ultra leftism. And the Spartacists were essentially revolutionaries and leftists, but not ultra leftists.
Mm-hmm.
So without going into too much detail, it was about, they agreed on the end goal of a truly free socialist society, but how to get to that place, to that stage, and the KAPD advocated the path of ultra leftism.
Yeah. And more on our rip of the shit lips and our critique of liberalism, you people can find on our talk from yesterday with Kern Jr. Kern, I didn't want to cut you off. What did you want to say?
Right. So I do want to say something about adding to what Axel said on perhaps a macro level. We must remember that liberalism in the United States, and indeed liberalism in 1920s, 30s Germany, particularly in the 20s, as Axel pointed out, was really institutionally supported by the judges. And not only the military, but also the judges in Germany. Right now, the judges, there are federal judges ruling against Trump. This is great, except when the judges, which is a very dispersed body, support Trump. We must remember that the French Revolution, which is often taken as our model, is still a bourgeois revolution. When you read the Declarations of Rights of Man and Citizens, they claim that the right to private property is sacred. To capture the state means that you're capturing a liberal system, which is of which, yeah, there's democracy, but there's also the right to private property. And what this means, of course, is the right for rich people to control the economy. Liberalism is yes. I agree. A serious problem, but I do want to, in passing, mention one fantastic book that I have all my students read, which they duly do not understand, and this is George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia, in which Orwell talks about Barcelona as a spontaneous anarchic, if you will, society being crushed first by the communists, then by the fascists. This is that's tough stuff to read if you're a leftist. And then you can just read Animal Farm if you don't get that.
Okay, that's tough.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'll step back here.
Okay.
And when you say communists, you mean the Spanish Communist Party, which has been Stalinized at that point, of course. So we're not talking about communists in the sense that Rosa Luxemburg or Karl Liebknecht or Paul Levy or Heinrich Brandler or August Thalheimer were communists. We're talking about a Stalinized Communist Party.
Yes, absolutely. I know.
Who were fighting the fascists in Spain.
Okay.
So
okay.
Let's move on.
There's a lot going on there, yeah. Which leads us to the next question. And you already raised that point. Can Rosa Luxemburg be read as a feminist thinker, or does her work remain limited by the classical Marxist framework of her time?
Okay, yes, I'll answer this first. Okay, so Rosa can and should be read as the thinker of woman liberation within the Marxist tradition. Even though she was not a feminist in the sense of contemporary liberal or identity-based feminism, she was directly and consciously involved in the international socialist women movement, especially through her writing and the speeches on women's suffrage, most notably women's suffrage and class struggle in 1912. In the text, Rosa did not treat women issues as a moral side topic or a reform agenda, but as a core part of last struggle. What mattered most is how Rosa framed the issues. She did not approach women as a separate social group detached from the class relation, but as a social position reduced within the logic of capitalism itself. So for Rosa, women's suffrage was not a neutral civil right. It was a way to politicize working class women, pushing them out of the naturalized spaces of family, care, and social reproduction and into open political struggle. And Rosa did something even more basic. She placed women at the center of Marxist ideas of liberation as the force that exposed the limits of both capitalism and orthodox Marxism. Women were not a secondary issue of the revolution, but an internal measure of emancipation itself. If women are told to wait until after the revolution, then what is that kind of revolution? And at the same time, Rosa clearly had historical limits. She did not develop a full theory of social reproduction, family life, or gender power in the way later Marxist feminist and social reproduction theory would. However, this should not be seen as a personal failure. It reflects the historical limit of early 20th century Marxism. What mattered more is that Rosa identified the core problem. Capitalism depends on a vast amount of invisible labor or marginalized labor, much of it carried out by women, and any liberation movement that fails to politicize this reality in the present will end up reproducing domination. And for this reason, I think feminism in Rosa's spirit cannot be separate from a critique of capitalism. It cannot be satisfied with symbolic representation, and it cannot accept women being treated as policy target or progressive symbol. Rosa did not offer a complete theory of gender, but she forced Marxism to expand into the area it had long treated as secondary, like everyday life, social reproduction, and the political capacity of working class women. That's my idea. Axel?
Yes, that's my general sense too. Rosa Luxemburg very much disliked being pigeonholed into the category of the women's question. So she did not want to be seen as, being responsible or typecast as someone who should just write about that topic. But she definitely dealt with gender issues, but she was intersectional in her approach. And the same applies, incidentally, to her Jewishness. She never denied being Jewish, but she made a point of saying that she does not have a special part in her heart for Jewish suffering. She was empathetic to the sufferings of all people, be they from the Russian Empire, be they from the British colonies or the French colonies in Africa or Asia or what have you. So Rosa Luxemburg's approach was intersectional. And of course, one cannot expect everything from Rosa Luxemburg. She has to be seen within the context of her time. And that also means the immense struggles of her time, the various hardships, being imprisoned, World War One, the pressing questions of her day and age, the priorities she had to set herself, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the question of gender, she was very close friends with Clara Zetkin, who was one of the most important early Marxist feminists. And that fact alone illustrates her deep interest in and awareness of questions of gender.
Yes, adding to this, I would like to point out that one of our panel, Ms. Sally Mju says some very smart things about this when she writes further on reproduction. I think that Luxemburg is right on when she says women should be at the center of Marxist analysis. Marx was quite aware of the problems of capitalist reproduction, and how and indeed we see now that the spheres of reproduction are now being repoliticized, because they are essential to the overall production process, which is which is the family. The family is the beginning of the production process. The capitalism depends upon the family to provide workers, and indeed, this is becoming an issue. This is what our glorious vice president, Vance, has said he wants to get rid of divorce. Or now, in order to have divorce, there has to be a criminal accusation. There has to be a crime in order to get a divorce. That when Vance says there's nothing worse than a childless single woman, she's not producing new workers. The whole idea of health and education, all these are problems of reproduction, and they are becoming much more, or have been for the last 20 years, the center of at least political change. In other words, here, history seems to have caught up with Rosa Luxemburg in seeing that, yes, women are the center of Marxist analysis. The production system doesn't work without reproductive system, and I think that's right. I think that's right. So that's my
Very
coda.
good.
Thanks.
Very good. That's
Yeah, so I think before we start to the next question, I think I would recommend people to read this book, Rosa Luxemburg, Woman Liberation and Marx Philosophy of Revolution by Dunayevskaya. It is a very good book. I think Axel knows it, right?
Very good.
very good.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, thank you all. Just a quick thing. I've observed in my circle of friends that there are people who by now actively, consciously decide against having kids, not just women, but reproduction in a sense, and the strike. Rosa Luxemburg pretty much spearheaded this kind of strike to not reproduce more soldiers for the empire. In a way, people seem to have caught up with her, and
Yeah.
they ask themselves the question: can I offer my kid a future? In
Yes.
which kind of world am I putting them? Where are the sea levels going to be in 50 years? How much underwater are we going to be here in northern
Yeah.
Germany? And those are points where poor people, I don't know, have a very so this is interesting for me, and really relates to my experiences. And then I also had to think about the Kurds in Syria, how now the central government is fighting the Kurds, and the Kurds are a really feminist power in that area, and a power for exactly this kind of politics Rosa essentially laid down.
Yes.
They have
Yes.
their militia. They are very powerful. They have been successful in fighting ISIS. They have been supported by the US. So that's in a small image, also reflecting this contradiction under capital we are still in, and Rosa is trying to get at. So I think this is a very important thing, and
we talk about this we talked about this yesterday. Remember, we talked about the Kurds.
I think we did that in the Zoom, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We did in the Zoom discussion afterwards. This is not Kurdistan, but there's a little pocket in northern Syria, or if you want to call it Syria. Really, it's a collection of ethnicities fighting it out, and the Kurds in northern Syria have one reason why there is struggle between the Syrian leader and is that the Islamic folks who support the current leader are upset that at least a quarter to a third of the Kurdish army is women. And the Islamists do not like this. This little pocket, there's a little fissure, a little rip in the fabric. In northern Syria, if we again want to call it that, I think it's called Rojava, and I might have that wrong, by the Kurds in Kurdistan. And again, I'm not talking about Kurdistan, but this little place which has an amazing, virtually a feminist state. And I encourage people to do research on this area. The place where this is discussed, and you may have objections to this or not, is in Al Jazeera. Whether you agree with Al Jazeera or not, I recommend that you simply read this to get a sense of what's happening in the Mideast today.
Shout out to Al Jazeera at this point. They really do a good coverage, which also would lead us to the next question here. What does Rosa's internationalism mean today in a world shaped by nationalism, war, and global inequality? Also, question from the chat. Sally.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, everybody been waiting for this. Well, her Rosa ideas of internationalism is not an abstract moral ideal about human solidarity. It is a structural political position closely linked to the Marxist view of capitalism as a global system based on exploitation, expansion, and war. So, following Marx, Rosa argues that modern nationalism cannot be understood apart from capitalist accumulation. Nationalism works as an ideology that ties cross-border exploitation and mobilize people to accept sacrifice and violence in the name of national interest. So, in the context of today's world, when nationalism is returning strongly and war is increasingly treated as normal, Rosa's ideas are especially important because she's firmly rejected the ideas that war is natural or unavoidable. Because to her, war is not an unfortunate break from peace, but a normal way in which imperial capitalism operates, turning economic competition into organized violence. Her internationalism does not allow the left to limit criticism to moral or humanitarian concerns. Instead, it forces us to ask about the economic and political structure that repeatedly reduced the war. The contemporary relevance of Rosa internationalism becomes even clearer when we look at growing global inequality. Today, wealth, labor, and risk are distributed in extremely unequal ways. War, crisis, and violence tend to fall on the poorer regions or the global south, or while economic and geopolitical benefits are accumulated elsewhere, the global north. We cannot speak meaningfully about liberation within one country or regions if its stability or prosperity depends on the systematic sacrifice of the worker in other parts of the world. In this sense, internationalism is a theoretical condition for understanding how different forms of global oppressions are connected. And more importantly, Rosa emphasized that nationalism does not operate only from above, it also enters the political feeling, thinking of ordinary people, placing the worker in different countries against one another, even when they share similar condition or exploitation. And internationalism, therefore, is not only an anti-war position, it is a political project aimed at rebuilding class solidarity across national borders against the fragmentation that capitalism constantly reduces. The meaning of internationalism today is more like preventing Marxism from being absorbed into nation-state logic. Marxism gives critical power only when it refuses to treat the world as indivisible, rejects the explanation of global inequality as unavoidable outcomes, and resists all attempt to limit solidarity within national boundaries. Otherwise, as Rosa warns very early on, socialism risks losing its emancipatory content and becoming just another language for managing a world full of war and inequality instead of trying to go beyond it. Yes, that's my idea.
Yes, when it comes to Rosa Luxemburg's take on the world, one of the things that's always stood out to me was her interest in the global south. Of course, even Marx became, as time went on, more and more engaged with India and other parts of Asia, saw this notion that Marxism is, Eurocentric, is of course very, very simplistic and one-dimensional. But especially when it comes to Lenin, but even more so Rosa Luxemburg, Marxism enhances its gaze and looks at the world as a whole. And Rosa Luxemburg is incredibly aware of and empathetic toward how capitalism as a global system affects everyone, non-European people, how they're particularly victimized by capitalism. She's aware of the various, mechanisms, unequal exchanges, and what she offers is not just a moral critique, but an analysis of how capitalism works. One of the ways where she differs with some contemporary Marxists like Lenin is her take on imperialism, where Lenin sees imperialism as especially connected with the rise of finance capitalism. To Rosa Luxemburg, imperialism has always been a core feature of capitalism. And Rosa Luxemburg is relentlessly opposed to nationalism. And there are many reasons for that, some personal reasons, of course, as a Jew who has been victimized by the cultural memory of centuries of anti-Semitism, as someone who was born in the Polish part of the Russian Empire. She was sympathetic to the plight of Poles within the Russian Empire. So she is aware of the damage that nationalism can do, Russification and so on and so forth. She's very suspicious of nationalism. She thinks that nationalism can also drain revolutionary movements and misdirect them into dangerous directions. So, I think we live in a day and age when nationalism has experienced a major resurgence, also because of the contradictions of capitalism. They're such that essentially the liberal project is collapsing, and what we see now is a major shift towards ultranationalism and fascism. And Rosa Luxemburg's critique of all of that is more relevant than ever, and not just her moral critique, but her analysis of how all of that is connected with the deep structure of how capitalism operates in terms of the entire capitalist system operating like a vacuum cleaner, sucking up the wealth of the world and rechanneling it into the various centers of capital accumulation around the globe. But as Sally pointed out, her alternative to that was not some sort of global South, BRICS type building of centers of capital accumulation, but the building of a socialist alternative based on participatory democracy and empowering ordinary people around the globe, especially in the global South.
Yes, I am going to now inhabit my pessimism of the intellect persona here, and point out the difference between a peace movement and internationalism. I think the 60s died with two major moments, at least in again the United States. With Roe v. Wade.
I think you might be frozen.
Uh-oh.
When the Americans came to the conclusion that the war in Southeast Asia was over, and thus the 60s were over. The revolution in America, the cultural revolution, the political revolution, it was over. Oh, the war's over. Great. The 60s are done. It is, people think that, oh, we have peace now, things are okay. Right now, Donald Trump's imperialism, his attempts to take Greenland are supported by maybe 4% of the American people. It's sort of easy to say that you're for peace, when really all you just have to do is say no. It's much more difficult to shift attention to Africa. Americans are befuddled by all those countries. All those, goodness, you have to think about tribes. Let's just forget about Africa, which is what we do. Africa is just too complicated, and we're just going to forget what's going on there. In other words, it's very easy to just say the politics of the global South, we're just going to ignore it. In other words, imperialism only matters really when it's in the north, in Greenland. There is an exception to this, and this is India. The American press, the New York Times, does pay attention to the plight of women, particularly the wives, the sexual politics of India, and feminist organizations in India. The problem of male suicide and in the farming communities of India, which leaves women with the burden. There are, but to a certain extent, even then, these are anti-feudal moments. That's to a degree that parts of India have never gotten out of the feudal stage because it was imperialized by the British Empire, which developed almost clearly out of from the aristocratic feudal elite. It's easy to see even the clitorectomies. That there was an international movement against clitorectomies, but this was against this was not capitalism. This was against patriarchy, or God knows what. Since a lot of these genital mutilation cases were perpetrated by women themselves, older women who carried out these processes. Um, um, in other words, we have far to go when we look at Africa, and the realization that I think that is the exploitative center of the production process today. Is what we are doing to extort, to exploit resources in Africa and the resulting wars that are continuing over there. Not only how they affect women, but it's just another war in Africa. We've sort of given in to that. So peace movements are problem. They are not internationalist. Anti-war is anti-war movements can pop up very easily. Even in World War I, it's you can get anti-war movements in the middle of an army. But it's very difficult to move from an anti-war position from a peace movement to real socialist internationalism. And that's my pessimism of the intellect position at this point, which I regret to take on, but we must hold true to it as well.
Very good. Very good.
Wonderful.
I will keep this brief and just jump right over to our next and last question.
Yes.
When rereading Rosa Luxemburg today, which ideas should be retained and which historical limits must be acknowledged in order to think seriously about socialism in the 21st century?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is the last questions for our panel today. So, rereading Rosa today require a double attitude. On the one hand, we need to keep the core theoretical principle that remain essential, and on the other hand, we must honestly acknowledge the historical limits of her thought. Only by holding the two together, we can read her Rosa remain a living critical tradition rather than becoming a frozen symbol or a richest doctrine. The first idea that must be kept is Rosa's understanding of democracy as a vital condition of socialism. For her, democracy is the living environment of the revolutionary process itself. Without debate, disagreement, mistake, and learning from below, socialism will quickly turn into a new form of domination. In the 21st century, when many left projects equate socialism with efficiency of state management or technical policy solution, this position still has strong critical force. And the second idea to retain is Rosa Deep's suspicions on of concentrated power, even when that power aimed to act in the name of class, revolution, or progress. Rosa did not reject organization, but she firmly rejected any logic in which the party, the state, or the leader present themselves as the voice of historical self. This principle remains highly relevant today when many movements move toward pluralities, professionalization, and dependence on institutions. The third and perhaps most fundamental idea is Rosa believes that emancipation can only be the work of the oppressors themselves. Directly continuing Marx's spirit, Rosa rejected all form of liberation on behalf of the others. This is not only a strategic principle but also a moral and political standard for distinguish real emancipation from regressive management. Rosa ideas also offer a critique of many tendencies on the contemporary left. Today, socialism is often reduced to a better policy, design, efficiency, governance, or electoral success. In these approaches, democracy from below is treated as secondary or even as obstacle to effectiveness. Ordinary people are expected to support program, vote correctly, or trusted experts rather than actively shape political direction themselves. And from her perspective, this shift is dangerous. A left that prioritizes stability, discipline, and correct strategy over mass participation risks reproducing new forms of domination in the name of the progress. And Rosa would also be critical of the left movement that postponed democracy and popular control by arguing that concentrated power is necessary for now during a transition period. And at the same time, taking Rosa seriously also means recognizing her historical limit. First, there is the lack of a systematic analysis of gender, race, and social reproduction. Although Rosa actively engaged with women issues and women suffrage, she did not develop a full theory of how capitalism depends on care work, family, or racialized form of oppressions, issues that are central to global capitalism today. And second, Rosa wrote in the context of the early 20th century industrial capitalism and a classical working class formation. Many forms of labor, class fragmentation, and global supply chains today go far beyond what she could analyze. Now, this does not make her ideas outdated, but it does make that contemporary Marxism must expand its objects and method rather than applying old category mechanically. And finally, Rosa could not foresee the form of soft power, technology, and media that shape politics in the 21st century. Like on algorithm, digital platform, or data governance, and the mediation of political emotions. These developments complicate the idea of democracy from below and require new theoretical tools, even if they can be still guided by Luxemburgian principles. However, Rosa Luxemburg is still one of the most important thinkers for today, and I believe that everyone should read her works. Yes.
That was a very thoughtful and very thorough response. So I very much agree with every single point here. Let me just reiterate some and emphasize them. Of course, if Rosa Luxemburg were alive today, I think she would be bewildered and horrified by what social media can do, both in terms of its emancipatory potential. I've seen some very positive things on TikTok, for example, where people use TikTok and other platforms to educate and promote emancipatory ideas, talk about Marxism. There are certain limits because you can only do these things within, a certain amount of time and space. But you have to meet people where they are. So there's some potential here. But at the same time, social media provides so much opportunity for manipulation on part of big tech, with all of those bots and all those opportunities for them to manipulate public opinion and to shape people's ideas and to play to their worst impulses. So obviously, Rosa Luxemburg, who was murdered in 1919, could not have foreseen many of those developments. She would have been horrified by the crimes of the 20th century in terms of the Holocaust, in terms of World War II, and the possibility of nuclear extinction, or the ecological extinction that is looming on our horizon. She was aware of environmental issues as they became problems, since capitalism has always been, environmentally very destructive. But obviously, she died too soon to be able to formulate an ecological critique of Marxism, even though that critique is already embedded in the fundamental logic of Marxism. To me, Rosa Luxemburg provides a very good counterweight to a concept that unfortunately is widespread among many segments of the left as well. The idea of politics as a spectator sport. Even though most of us would abhor it and reject it, at least theoretically, there's this sense that, we just need to wait for some sort of a revolutionary moment, some sort of a new movement, some sort of new political leaders, some sort of, savior figures who might come and help us. And obviously, those kinds of things, they're not going to happen. Sometimes Rosa Luxemburg comes a little close to it, a little. In her rhetoric of revolution, when she describes revolution as in, I was, I am, I will be, but it's not really conceiving of revolution in similar terms as the way born-again Christians conceive of the rapture. To her, revolution is something that is not, supernatural or miraculous. It is something that is brought into existence by flesh and blood human beings, something that you must actively prepare for and organize for. So mass politics, bringing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of, and millions, tens of millions of people into politics, educating them, organizing them. All of these things are immensely important. So while the left, of course, does depend on charismatic figures, over-reliance on charismatic figures, no matter how important they have been as catalysts. And I'm thinking of people like Corbyn or Bernie Sanders or what have you. There are always significant historical limitations. And the same applies to Rosa Luxemburg herself as well. So what we need to learn from Rosa Luxemburg is to not idealize anyone, including Rosa Luxemburg, but to approach her critically, to read her, to keep her alive by trying to ask ourselves how much of her thought is still relevant to our own historical moment, and to, again, try to do the hard work of self-cultivation, of education, of emphasizing, the project of political education, the relevance of political education for the left, and how political education and political organizing are interconnected. And I think it's very fitting that the Linkspartei has the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation as its educational foundation. It's good that it is named after Rosa Luxemburg, because she really very much believed that every working class person should be an intellectual, and every intellectual in many ways is part of the working class. The two go hand in hand.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
I agree. Now I'm going to move to optimism of the will, and oddly enough, optimism of the intellect. Um, 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 and here I'm going to focus on democracy and what Rosa Luxemburg understood as the best of democracy. In other words, democracy as an authentic moment of popular participation, of education, of self-realization through the idea that the I is the we and the we is the I. These are Rosa Luxemburg is talking about this so ahead of her time, sort of. And what I mean by that, I had a professor who was very popular in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He didn't write anything, but he was very popular in American academic culture as a leftist. His name was John Shar. And John Shar in the early 70s, when everybody's talking about revolution and capitalism and class analysis and even feminism, when all these things are happening, John Shar was saying democracy, small d democracy. He was saying that this is the core of it all. And his vision of democracy was exactly the way that Sally describes and Axel describes as Rosa Luxemburg's best version of democracy as an authentic popular movement. And here's where I get to optimism of the intellect. Tocqueville, when he talks about the New England townships in democracy in America, makes a claim that democracy is the most, dare I say, natural form of human organization. And he even compares the New England townships to the glory days of Athens and early Republican Rome. Now we may disagree with him on Athens and Rome, and we may even disagree with him on the American New England townships. But there is a sense that democracy is the most natural political organization. I have always been surprised at moments like who would have thought that democracy pops up in this little fissure, this little tear in the fabric in northern Syria. When during moments of revolution or the revolutionary moments really does spark genuine democracy. You'll find it at the core. Democracy, you can, in West German towns along the Rhine in the medieval period, people say there was democracy there. Democracy can happen sort of spontaneously and dare I say organically as the most human organization. It's easy as I to point out, no, this is idealism. The idea that there even is a natural organization. That's nonsense. Well, oddly enough, democracy pops up in the oddest places, in the oddest moments. You can't deny this as a historian. This is true. The people tend towards when they are working with what they have, they will form a democracy. Another reason for this is that the state knows it needs the people. The bourgeois could not have been successful in the French Revolution without the working class, without the city of Paris. The elites need this authentic democracy. Oddly enough, this democracy can also pop up in a military situation. Both the Greek ancient Athenian army of hoplites was extremely democratic. During the American Civil War, the northern armies, as they moved through the South, became extremely oddly enough democratic and anti-slavery. Democratic moments can form in the oddest places, oddest places. I had another military when you get this authentic democracy in the oddest places. To this extent, one as an intellectual, through an intellectual analysis, democracy happens. Oh, yeah, state leaders need this during World War II. During World War II, the American army followed the Soviet army with incredible interest. That articles about Soviet success in World War II and the Soviet Union altogether were a fascination for the GIs. In other words, who would have guessed, right? These are sort of the oddest places where you can get real democracy or the possibility of real democracy. If you're an intellectual, you cannot deny this optimism. And Rosa Luxemburg was on to that. She was on to that. And so it's always nice to end with the optimism of the intellect. One more thing, speaking of optimism, here we are, international group, talking about Rosa Luxemburg, following our what our comrade Sally is written. We here we are living proof that the net can be democratized. Yes. So let's look for those moments. Rosa did. I will say her name. And yeah, that will be my last 2 cents.
Okay, Coin, we can end.
Let's take a break and then come back for a rehash with the 4 of us. I'd like that. Is that okay? Sally's getting tired.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to make one quick point about democracy. It's so important to look at democracy as a process, as opposed to a thing that you have or don't have. I'm just deeply annoyed when certain people, talk about the world is divided into democracies versus autocracies. And of course, things are far more complicated. And, I always tell my students, almost every society I'm aware of claims to be a democracy, right?
Yes.
And what societies advertise about themselves and what they truly are not really the same thing, right?
Yes.
So, when we deal with democracy, it's a process. We are hopefully on a journey toward democracy. There are some democratic practices, but democratic institutions have to be built. We don't really have democracy yet. We want to have democracy, but no one has democracy. Just as I would insist that there has been no socialism on this planet. When people talk nonsense about socialist states, there have been no socialist states so far. And the same applies to democracies. There may have been aspirations to build democracy, but real democracy is yet to be built. just as real socialism is yet to be built. They remain projects for the future, very relevant and necessary projects because our survival as a species depends upon them. But we should not pretend for 1 second that we have seen democracy or socialism as of yet. We need to see them down the road.
Yes. I will add as a criticism to what I just said. But by the way, John Shar said you can't have a modern state and democracy. You just can't have it. You just can't have the two together. Modernity gives us the promise of democracy, but cannot provide. Everybody wants to be democratic. In fact, the democratic idea thrives within the modern state. They all want to be democracies. It's the promise, it's the carrot that's held up, but can never be reached. Furthermore, all these places of democracy that pop up here and there, they also are like frail orchids and are easily stamped out. That's the pessimist of the intellect coming right back. Sure, democracy may be natural, but so are orchids, and they are easily stomped out. Yes.